it's you owe $200,000 on it, but I'd be willing to give you $180 on it if the bank will allow me to do that.
Right.
And then so a group like us, an agent would go in and work on behalf of the owner of that property to negotiate a short sale, and which is a very long, involved process. But if they agree, if the two parties agree, then I can sell that property to you for $180,000. The homeowner avoids a foreclosure.
Okay.
But again, this is with willing parties. You can't just go and see something on Zillow and say it's pre-foreclosure and make an offer on it if I'm not selling.
I am upset with Zillow.
Well, no, they're just doing what they've been told to do. They just pull from the public record.
Yes. And then the other thing about that too is I think most people know this now, but the short sale isn't as quick as you just saying,
it's not.
No, it's not that quick.
Will you accept this amount for the property? Because, like Natalie said, you have to go through the whole.
Keep going.
Mm-hmm.
The whole process, and that means you have to get the approval from the bank first. The owner says, yes, I'm willing to consider this if the bank is willing to accept it. Mm. Then we as the agent will go to the bank and say, okay, the owner is willing to put their house on the market for this amount. We have a buyer. Would you be willing to short sale the property based on the current market values in the area?
Interesting. So I have another question. So I know that like when you're watching shows on TV and stuff like that.
Stop watching shows. They're false.
I probably should stop watching.
No.
All right. So I know that on one of the shows, I won't call its name, the premise is, quit trying to find the best house in the neighborhood. You find the worst house in the best neighborhood and you go from there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how do you actually feel about that? Like, do you suggest, like, like I'm a parent, I'm looking for, the best house that I could afford, in the best school district that I can get into. Mm-hmm. But, it might be a house that's like, man, this is some crap. But, with a little sweat equity, it could become something better. Like, do you ever recommend that to clients, or do you say stay away from that, let the investors do that? And then, like, how do you approach that?
In my opinion, it really depends on your ultimate goal. If you are the type of buyer that doesn't mind putting in a little extra money to fix it up, then sure, I would say go for that. But if you are trying to find something, like you said, for your family, you want to be in a good school district, you want to find the perfect house, I definitely don't suggest that, because you're going to be mad at the end of the day when you get in that property and there's so much work to be done, but you weren't prepared to do that.
Because most people look at work as cosmetic. Mm-hmm. They think that, okay, put a little carpet here, put a little paint here is habitable. No. A lot of these properties have, unseen details of things that need to be done with the plumbing, the electrical work, things like that. And the worst thing is to get in something with your family and then you end up spending $10,000 to $15,000 out of pocket to manage the plumbing, or you got to do electrical work over the entire property or something like that because you got it at a deal. Because again, a deal in real estate really needs a magnifying glass.
Right.
In this market, you gotta make sure that, because again, if you're buying a house, let's say the values of the homes in the neighborhood is $250, and this house is listed at $190. There's a problem. There's a concern, and it's a major. If they're willing to reduce it that much to get it off of their hands, there's some major structural or some type of concerns there.
And that's why you always want to have a home inspection done.
Okay.
Even in a new home subdivision, I recommend having a home inspection done, because you want to know, walking in the door, what issues you may be facing when you get into this property. And like it was stated earlier, you just don't want to walk in the door and have to come out of pocket another $50,000 because you went and bought the lowest cost house you find because that's, it was the cheapest thing out there. Mm-hmm. You really have to know what you want walking in the door.
Right.
And we tell people that all the time, because you get people that say, I need a 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath house. It needs to sit on the basement. I need it to be move-in ready. Then you show them that in the area they want to be in, and it's out of their cost range.
Right.
And so then you show them, okay, based off of the criteria you're giving me and what you actually qualify for, this is what's available. But they see that and they
don't want that.
They don't want that because they want to do something different. So then they start looking at, like you said, properties that might need a little, well, I'll just go in and put a little work in it. But if that's not really in your heart to go in and put that work in, don't
and if
do that to yourself.
If you're going to do that, have a plan to live elsewhere. You never want to move into something with your family and working around, renovations around your family.
Right.
If you can do that, if there's, if something's affordable to do that, stay where you are. And at least give yourself 4 to 6 months to do what you need to do with this other property, because there's nothing worse than getting on one day and it's like, oh, well, the water don't work. And it's because of a major repair that was not disclosed, because a lot of these properties that are priced low, they're sold as is. There are no repairs.
Exactly.
There's no disclosure. There's nothing. It's all right. It's yours now. It's your problem.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is some good information.
Yeah, save and research is really
Absolutely
kind of the first step before we even start looking at credit.
Yes.
Have your little savings under your
research.
belt and start researching the market. Sometimes I say 6 months before you plan on starting your search. Research what's out there and see what the market really looks like, and know what you can afford. If you're paying $1,300 in rent and you don't want to go above that, then you need to know where you need to be dollar-wise to make that match. And it's not apples to apples with renting and buying, because you also have to, keep into consideration your escrow. You have your taxes and insurance that actually factor into your monthly mortgage. So, even though the market it usually works in your favor that you probably save more by buying in the long run, you still have to factor in all of that stuff to get where you need to be, because people are like, well, I can afford this much house because I pay this in rent. Well, not really. You got to factor in a lot of other things that goes into that dollar amount. Plus there are HOA fees and all that kind of stuff that is not included in your monthly payment, but is a monthly responsibility. There are HOA fees. When I bought my first house, my HOA fees were $215 a month. And that is on top of my mortgage. That was ridiculous.
Right. So you really, like you said, you have to do your research. You have to know. You have to know what you want walking in the door.
Okay, so when y'all say do your research, what am I researching? Because if I'm already on Zillow, I'm on Trulia, I'm stalking.
You need to talk to some professionals.
So who would I? And I don't mean just me. I mean from this perspective, like, what do you mean by doing the research? Like, what should I be doing? Who do I need to talk to?
Talk to an agent, a licensed agent, and then start studying the market. And Zillow and Truly are a good way to start, where you start looking at the ebbs and flows of the market. If you're looking at a particular community, you can go on there and see what has sold for what price. And then you can go in and compare, okay, this was a 3-bedroom, this had a basement, but this was a 4-bedroom with no basement. But it looks like there were some renovations done. You start looking at what the different variances are in the market.
No, you need to talk louder.
Oh, but yeah, that kind of stuff. But the first thing is to talk to an agent. Talk to an agent about the area you're looking to be in. What are some resources online to look and do something like that, to see because just looking at Truly and Zillow is just going to give you a false reality of the market. Because, like you said, a lot of those things aren't updated.
Right.
The only thing that updates every 24 hours is if something is in the multiple listing service and there are changes made to that record. But outside of that, Zillow and Trulia don't mandate changes to their records until someone tells them to update that.
So if I'm looking, I should start stalking MLS?
Well, you personally can't, because unless you're a licensed agent, you would not have access. So again, find an agent that can tell you where to go. But yeah, there are public MLS sites that you can look. Yeah, like in Atlanta, there's a public site for Georgia MLS and for First Multiple Listing Service. There you go. And you can go on those public sites that don't require you to have a license number, and you can just create a profile as a guest.
Okay.
But that's why it's good to have an agent, because they can set that up for you.
Okay.
And you don't actually have to go looking for that information.
That's good information.
Mm-hmm.
Good information.
So after you find the house,
All right.
talk about the talk about the negotiation process a little bit.
So that's where it gets a little tricky sometimes. Because once you find a property that you like, then you sit at the table with your agent and you write the offer. With that offer, you have to be prepared to provide earnest money, which, let me just say, there's no set amount for earnest money. Now, occasionally, an agent will have a particular amount that the owner is requesting or that they're requiring. Usually it's like 3% that they want in earnest money, or 1% of whatever the list price is. So just know that you do have to have some money when you're doing the offer. You don't actually have to provide it, but you have to be ready to provide it, because if they do accept that offer, it usually has to be available within 48 hours.
It's kind of like your deposit.
Correct.
Yeah,
You
good
put
faith.
something on it.
Mhm.
Yeah, good
It's a
faith.
good,
Alright.
That's exactly what it
you
is,
put
a good
something
faith
on it.
deposit.
Okay, all right.
So then you write the offer, you let them know what your good faith is going to be, then we submit that offer, and you have what is called time is of the essence. You can give them a time limit of when that offer expires. Typically, we do about 48 hours, maybe 3 days at the most.
Yeah.
You don't want to drag it out too long, but you submit that offer, and then once the other agent, just say they come back and they say they don't accept it. They accept all the terms except for your offer price. Let's say the house was listed for $150 and you offer $125. And they come back and they want to negotiate or counter that, and they say we accept everything but the $125. We go back to the $150. Now you have the option of either accepting that as the buyer, or you can counter again. You can go back and forth with this counter as many times as everybody is willing to do that. Usually it doesn't go back more than 2 or 3 times. After that, somebody walks away and says it's not worth it. But you want to go back and do your counter offer, and let's just say they go ahead and accept it. You counter back at $140 and they say, okay, it's a deal. So in that contract, let me retract this a little bit. When you initially submitted that contract, you told them that you were going to pay $1,500 in earnest money. You told them that you would have that deposited within 3 days of a binding contract. You told them that you're asking them to pay for a 210 home buyer warranty. So when you purchase this property, you have a little coverage when you get in there. You're also telling them that you're asking them, I should say, to help contribute towards your closing costs, which typically we ask for about 3%, 3 to 4%. It just depends. And again, this is where the agent has that relationship with the loan officer, because they'll be able to tell them exactly what you need in closing costs. So we'll have a good idea of how much to ask for. So all of that is written out in your special steps. Okay, so moving back ahead, they've accepted your offer.
We got like 6 minutes.
Okay, they accepted your offer and you go under contract. So usually you get about 7 to 10 days to have a home inspection and do your due diligence. You want to knock everything out at that time. If you got contractors that you want to come in and have a look at it, have them come and do it at that time. Because after that, if you don't go back and say, hey, I need these items looked at, you're locked in that contract. And if you walk away after that time frame, unless it's related to your loan not being approved, then you lose that earnest money that you told them you were going to give them. And then we go to closing.
That's it.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Now, again, there are also loan stipulations in there.
There are.
So
and appraisal.
Loan and appraisal, right. So that property would have to appraise for the value that you've written on that offer or more. Mm-hmm. No less.
No less.
Because if it appraises less and you're under contract to use a loan, we got to go back to the negotiation table. So we either have to ask that seller, will you reduce to this price, or they have the option to walk away at that point.
Correct.
And then there are also the loan. Even though you're pre-qualified for a loan, you still have to go through underwriting. So during this time period, your loan officer will take you through the underwriting process, which is, again, verifying your employment, looking at any liens, all of your credit. And again, during this time period where you're under contract, don't touch a thing.
Please don't.
Pay your rent, pay your utilities, pay your car, pay your existing bills. Don't go buy it, make any major purchases.
Don't get a credit card.
Don't pull any money